Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, honorable mayors, distinguished partners and colleagues. This is Yunus Arikan from ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability. I'm the Director of Global Advocacy at the ICLEI World Secretariat based in Bonn, Germany. A warm welcome to all of you, our distinguished panelists all around the world and our participants around the world. In the next 2 hours, we will be having an inspirational dialogue on climate leadership and action. And we will be having this one of the first global dialogues between ministers, mayors, governors, and UN officials on how we can accelerate climate neutrality in cities and contribute to global climate action, raising the ambition. Before going to the substance and introducing our guest, let me give you a couple of technical information. This session is recorded. All participants are muted. During the first hour, you would be able to also, and the second hour, you would be able to type in your questions in the question box. Because of our intense list of speakers for the first hour, we will have the Q&A towards the end, or in most cases also in the second hour. During this session, we will have 2 videos and other speakers will be intervening on live to the session. With that, I'd like to, without further delay, once again introduce our panel. We will be enjoying an impressive line of speakers. We'll first start with the Minister of Environment of Japan, His Excellency Shinjiro Koizumi, and he will be intervening via video message. And I'd like to ask my colleagues to start showing his video message to our session.
I am Koizumi Shinjiro, Minister of the Environment, Japan. I would like to express my gratitude to ICLEI and its co-organizers. I am especially thankful to the Race to Zero campaign initiator, UNFCCC Secretary General Patricia Espinosa, and the high-level climate action champion, Nigel Topping. At the outset of today's event, centered on the themes of the net zero target by 2050 and decarbonization, I'd like to announce 2 good news. One is about coal-fired power plants, and the other is about the zero-carbon city movement in Japan. To begin with, let me tell you about the first good news on coal-fired power plants. This month, the Japanese government has announced a new policy on the export of coal-fired power plants. Japan has revised its policy to help export of infrastructures to support a transition to decarbonization. The government will not, in principle, support the coal-fired power plants planned in the future in countries where the government of Japan does not have complete knowledge about their energy circumstances and challenges, as well as their policies towards decarbonization. The strategic policy for the overseas expansion of infrastructures aims at promoting the export of infrastructures under economic cooperation with the government of Japan. However, in this new strategy, only coal-fired power plants are defined as the ones not to be supported, which is unprecedented. At the last stage of discussions on this matter, the minister in charge of energy policy issued instructions to start discussions on the ways to phase out inefficient coal-fired power plants by 2030 in Japan. As a result of this revision of the policy on the export of coal-fired power plants, the ministry in charge of climate change and the one in charge of energy have started to jointly work to promote transition to decarbonization, domestically and internationally. I want to emphasize that this is a clear departure from the past. Then, I will tell you about the second good news on zero-carbon cities. Last year in September, when I was appointed Minister of the Environment, there were only 4 zero-carbon cities, local governments committing to achieving zero carbon emissions by 2050. Following a wide call for other local governments to join the zero carbon commitment, zero carbon cities have now exceeded 100 within a year. Yesterday, 47 municipalities, including Kita Ibaraki City and Okayama Prefecture, announced their commitments to net zero carbon. Saitama City, whose mayor will make a presentation in today's event, also joined the net zero carbon cities. With these statements, this encompasses almost 70 million people, exceeding half of Japan's population. The increase in the number of local governments committing to decarbonization reflects the will to fight against climate change. Last month, after the publication of the white paper on the environment, the Ministry of the Environment declared that this is nothing but a clear manifestation of the climate crisis. This month, many lives were lost as heavy rains in the western part of Japan triggered river flooding in residential areas. People in the regions suffering from intensifying natural disasters over the last few years have been increasingly feeling threatened by climate risks. As a result of this growing sense of urgency towards the climate crisis, the zero carbon city movement is expanding. I strongly believe that as more than half of Japan's population has now committed to decarbonization, we will be seeing an irreversible race to zero. I trust that local governments' ambitious goals will be a driving force to accelerate the achievement of net zero carbon for Japan as a whole. I sincerely hope that this event itself will be an opportunity to trigger a global transition to decarbonization. Thank you. Arigato.
I think we all would like to express our warm appreciation to this very inspirational message from the Minister of Environment of Japan. It was really a very motivating and giving the hope that the combination of the local and national efforts would really make our achievements a success story, and this will be exemplary to the rest of the other nations. In that regard, we would like to immediately invite our second guest, the representative of UN Climate Change Secretary, Deputy Executive Secretary, Mr. Ovaid Sarmat, who would give us the guidance about how a national effort could be now globally coordinated. And Mr. Sarmat, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for joining us. Can we unmute Karen Pedley?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Excellent, excellent.
Excellent.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Yunus, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to colleagues from different parts of the world. It's a great pleasure for me to be here and to share our remarks on this very important event. First of all, let me start by recalling that in 2020, governments must significantly boost their ambition through enhanced national climate action plans, which is referred to as, you know, the NDCs. Together, we need to better serve the parties and other stakeholders to narrow the gap between climate action and the imperatives defined by science to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. We just heard from His Excellency Shinjiro Koizumi, who is a great champion for climate action, especially in our climate change process. Very encouraging news about the recent decision to phase out inefficient coal-fired plants by 2030. And also that more than 100 cities who have joined the zero carbon city movement in Japan. So these are extremely encouraging news, and we would like to commend everyone to who have done this, and to make sure that others follow in their footsteps. Our world has, as we all know, been constrained by COVID-19 pandemic. It's been turned upside down, and the attention by the governments and other stakeholders is rightly placed on safeguarding the health and well-being of people. However, the climate crisis did not disappear with the arrival of COVID, and remains humanity's greatest long-term threat to its survival on this planet. And we're still not on track towards the pathways that are consistent with the Paris Agreement goals. We have the solutions, we have the commitment, we have many leaders who are taking strong action, and we cannot, unfortunately, wait for a climate action vaccine. One key question in the policy domain now is COVID-19 recovery. We stand at a transformational moment in human history, a moment that future generations will identify as pivotal, one that moved us from one era to the next. It is entirely possible, but we must act now to achieve it. Instead of building back better, which we hear often in very many news outlets and reference being made, but instead we must build forward. This means enhancing policies that promote green growth, protect biodiversity, and embrace renewable energy. We need a coordinated global recovery from COVID-19 that follows the Paris Agreement and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. A recovery that will tackle climate change in a planned, just, and equitable manner, and one that will result in a world that is safe, healthy, sustainable, and more equitable for all of us. For the success of this endeavor, we strongly advocate and support multi-governance, action, and dialogue, which are fundamental. As we all know, governments cannot drive up the green economy or tackle climate change in isolation from subnational actors, businesses, investors, or civil society. The Paris Agreement was adopted with unanimous recognition that everyone at all levels must be engaged. And this is what UN Climate Change Race to Zero campaign is all about. Its purpose is to mobilize leadership and support from businesses, cities, regions, investors who are working to create a healthy, resilient, and zero emissions recovery. Our event today, and thanks to ICLEI for hosting all of us, embodies such a multi-level dialogue, bringing together ministers, as we heard, governors, mayors, international actors, our climate champion, and many other actors who are engaged in this endeavor. And this we refer to as inclusive multilateralism. And we have been promoting this, that it is as a critical driver for higher ambition. But from here is the important step. Cities and regions. Ambitious climate action can and must encourage parties to be more ambitious in their NDCs. Under the Paris Agreement, parties will convene a global stocktake process to assess collective progress towards the purpose and long-term goals of the Paris Agreement. The outcome of the global stocktake will showcase best practices and inform further climate action. It'll benefit from reports by parties and also from non-party stakeholders such as ICLEI. And I really sincerely thank ICLEI for all what you do. As such, the NDCs and global stocktake process that I just mentioned provide a very fundamental platform and function as a connector for multi-level governance. Our hope, therefore, is that these dialogues become a new normal and we ratchet up the ambition of the NDCs this year, an important and helpful source of information and a push for the governments to take action. Finally, Yunus, let me thank you, Minister Koizumi, our Mayor Sridharan, and everybody else who is on the panel today for participating in this extremely important event. And we at the UNFCCC are solidly working with all of you, and you can count on our full support. And last but not least, please stay safe, take good care, and hope to see you all sometime very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarmat. Excellent motivations, and actually this is giving us a clear signal that our local action is not anymore isolated from the national and global efforts. And with the next couple of minutes, we will start to hear success stories, lessons learned from the pioneering members of ICLEI across the world. And without further ado, I would like to immediately start with to invite Mr. Suichi Abe, Governor of Nagano Prefecture, actually the first prefecture in Japan who has announced a commitment to net zero. So, Mr. Abe, the floor is yours, and thank you very much for your leadership.
Thank you for your kind introduction. I am Abe Shuichi, and I'm the Governor of Nagano Prefecture, Japan. Thank you very much for having me at ICLEI's Race to Zero dialogues today. Last December, Nagano became the first prefecture in Japan to declare climate emergency. At that time, we also announced our resolution to go zero carbon by 2050. These actions were driven by three main reasons. One, serious disasters and increased awareness of the climate crisis. Last October, Super Typhoon Hagibis tore through Nagano Prefecture, causing an embankment of the Chikuma River, the longest river in Japan, to collapse, and resulting in 13 deaths and 150 injuries. The total damage amounted to $2.6 billion, a cost which exceeds Nagano Prefecture's annual tax revenue. Such disasters have led to widespread recognition of climate change as a real crisis and to momentum towards a decarbonized world. Two, our generation's responsibility for climate change measures. Our generation is the first to have scientific knowledge that human activities cause climate change. Therefore, it is our responsibility to mitigate and take immediate action to adapt to climate change. We must make every effort to ensure that future generations do not inherit a planet in the middle of a climate crisis, which could threaten the survival of humanity. Three, the significant role of local governments in fighting climate change. In the same way that governors and mayors have spearheaded efforts to curb the spread of COVID-19, local governments should play a significant role in the fight against climate change. The main efforts necessary to combat climate change, such as the promotion and establishment of sustainable lifestyles and the creation of enjoyable, workable communities, are the responsibility of local government. In an international collaboration, local governments around the world must take the initiative to promote climate change measures in partnership with the central government and non-governmental organizations. Based on these beliefs, Nagano Prefecture will strive to formulate and implement advanced policies. In order to realize the goals of our climate emergency declaration, Nagano Prefecture announced climate crisis breakthrough policies in April of this year. These policies, which outline specific numerical targets and actions to achieve them, represent Nagano Prefecture's climate change measures to realize a zero carbon society by 2050. Our specific numerical targets are 1. To reduce CO2 emissions to net zero by 2050, and 2. To reduce final energy consumption by 70% and triple renewable energy production by 2050, as compared to 2016. For example, we will continue to maintain regulations which require inspections of renewable energy and sustainable energy performance, such as insulation, for all new buildings, while also considering stricter regulations. In addition, we will utilize the world's largest solar potential map, developed last year, to maximize the use of sunlight and heat in homes. The prefectural government will put forth its utmost effort to work together with the citizens of Nagano to achieve these policies. Last June, at the G20 ministerial meeting on energy transitions and global environment for sustainable growth, held in Karuizawa Town, Nagano, Nagano Prefecture and ICLEI Japan presented the Nagano Declaration on Partnership for Collaborative Action for Sustainable Development. Based on this declaration, we are determined to collaborate closely with both domestic and foreign local governments and non-governmental organizations in an effort to decarbonize the world. Let us take action together to protect our beautiful Earth and to realize a sustainable society that we can pass on to future generations with pride. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Abe. I think this was an excellent this demonstration of how you were able to connect your energy and global efforts to climate action and also within the context of sustainable development goals. And I think we will hear more with other cities from Japan in the next couple of minutes, but having this multi-level collaboration is really exactly what we need. So we thank you very much for your leadership and the Nagano Prefecture, and we will continue to work further. From now on, I will change our continent. We're going to Australia now. We have the Lord Mayor of Hobart, Anne Reynolds, joining us. Australia has been a champion, especially local government in Australia has been a champion during the Kyoto era to push their government and nation into more active climate action. And since Paris Agreement, they're also championing the climate emergency movement. So we will hear more from Mayor Anne Reynolds. So the floor is yours. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Reynolds. Just a second, we have a microphone. If we turn on the microphone.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thanks so much to ICLEI for organising this event. I'd like to acknowledge all my fellow mayors and the governor and the minister for your participation today. It's lovely to meet you online. I'd also like to acknowledge the Race to Zero campaign, which is a very important new initiative, and I'm very pleased to be part of talking about our efforts here in Australia today. I'm also very pleased to be a new member of the ICLEI Regional Advisory Committee for the Oceania region. And that's the Oceania region is a region that has one of the world's largest per capita emitters, which unfortunately is Australia. And the Oceania also includes some of the nations that are most vulnerable to climate change, our brothers and sisters in the Pacific. The climate emergency movement is now a global movement that started here in Australia. The first climate emergency declaration globally was an initiative of an inner city council in the city of Melbourne. And that happened in 2016. And since then, 96 of Australia's 540 councils, representing 1/3 of the Australian population, have declared climate emergencies. And I'm proud that the city that I lead, the city of Hobart, was the first council in the state of Tasmania to declare a climate emergency. We did this, because our community asked us to do this. They asked us to do this as a way of demonstrating to them that we understand the huge risk that climate change poses to our city and the well-being of our community. Hobart Council has been taking action on climate change since 1999, and we have achieved very significant emission reductions in our organisation. In Tasmania, we're very lucky we have hydro as our main source of energy, but we still have some really big challenges in other sectors that we've been working on now for 2 decades. The Climate Emergency Declaration is just a declaration, but it does signal to our community, as well as our state government and our national government, that we are serious about this issue and we will take further steps to tackle the issue. For many of the councils around Australia, the declaration is an important way to signal to their communities that the council is taking ongoing and concrete steps towards becoming climate neutral cities. Australian Climate Emergency Declaration councils are all engaged in some sort of climate action, and that includes a whole range of actions, whether it's replacing street lights to be low energy, long life globes, or whether it's working to encourage active transport or installing solar panels on our council and community-owned buildings. All of us will need the impetus of our climate emergency declarations to spur us into further actions after the COVID crisis. It's fair to say that local government in Australia is under more extreme financial pressure as a result of the pandemic. And our community, which was so engaged in this issue of climate change, is now very focused on the health crisis, as they should be. But again, we do hope that the climate emergency brings that passion that we saw in our streets from the student strike movement back to our streets in our communities. All of us want to get our communities to do more as well in their own emission reductions and our business communities as well. And we also want to use our collective voices to get our state and national governments to take stronger action and a stronger lead on climate change. The Climate Emergency Declaration Councils, we are using our shared support for the declaration as an umbrella under which we can work more closely together and more strategically. There is a newly formed alliance of local governments and other organisations that have declared a climate emergency, and that's just come together in the last few weeks. It's called Climate Emergency Australia. And then, of course, we have the very important work of the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, which I'm part of and many of us are part of in Australia. And the links that network provides to international climate action spurs us on, gives us inspiration, and links us to all of you. And I believe that it's only through us working together that we will really realise the great influence and action that we all know can be taken at the city level. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Reynolds. I think this was another example of different driving forces. We have national leadership, we have global procedures, but the bottom-up approach and the citizen engagement and the response of local governments to their citizens is one of the strongest drivers of ambitious climate action. And I think we will hear more about this experience, and thanks to the leadership of Australian local governments. I think now we are still in the Asia Pacific. We'll now go back to a neighbor of Japan, which is Republic of Korea. We will hear from Mayor of Suwon. He will join us with a video. It's important to note that Korea has been a champion of local agenda over the past 20 years, and now they're also stepping up, especially on climate ambitious action. So we will hear the latest initiatives from the Korean local government. Mayor Suwon, Mr. Yeon Tae-yang will join us via video message. So I'd like to ask my colleagues to show his video message to us.
세계 도시들의 지속 가능 발전을 위해 애쓰시는 세계 지방도시 시장님들과 이클레이 관계자 여러분 반갑습니다. 대한민국 수원시장 염태영입니다. 코로나 사태 속에서도 멈출 수 없는 탄소 제로 레이스 캠페인을 위해서 온라인으로 진행하는 웨비나를 제안하고 추진하신 아시옥 알렉산더 스리드하란 이클레이 회장님께도 감사와 존경의 인사를 전합니다. 저는 이클레이 글로벌 집행위원으로서 또 대한민국 기초정부를 대표하는 협의회 회장으로서 한국지방정부의 지속가능한 발전 방향을 제시하고 탄소 중립 실천 역량을 강화하는 데 온 힘을 쏟고 있습니다. 지난 6월 5일 UN 인간환경회의가 정한 세계환경의 날에는 대한민국 모든 기초정부가 한자리에 모여서 기후위기 비상선언문을 발표했습니다. 그 선언문에는 온실가스 감축 목표를 설정하고 실천하겠다는, 그리고 2050년까지 탄소 중립 넷제로를 달성하겠다는 기초정부 대표들의 다짐을 담았습니다. 그날 우리가 함께한 기후위기 비상선언은 미래 세대를 위한 우리 세대의 양심선언이었습니다. 그 한 달 뒤엔 지방정부와 중앙정부와 손을 맞잡고 탄소 중립 사회를 위해 본격적인 행동에 나서기로 뜻을 모았습니다. 이날 출범한 탄소 중립 지방정부 실천연대는 탄소 중립 실천을 위한 제도적 기반을 마련하고 신기후체계가 요구하는 핵심 가치를 실현하면서 또 탄소 중립을 인류의 보편적 가치로 삼아서 시민 모두의 동참을 유도해 나가는 구심점이 될 것입니다. 우리는 지금 기후변화가 초래한 엄청난 환경의 변화, 그로 인해 갈수록 빈발하는 자연재난과 감염병으로부터 혹독한 시련을 겪고 있습니다. 지금의 코로나19 팬데믹 역시 이와 무관하지 않죠. 더 늦기 전에 탄소 중립 사회를 이뤄내는 것만이 유일한 인류 생존의 길임을 우리 모두는 잘 알고 있습니다. 기후위기는 어느 한 지역, 어느 한 나라의 힘만으로는 이겨낼 수 없는 전 지구적 과제입니다. 그 세계가 그 중에서도 일선 현장의 행정을 책임지고 있는 지방정부의 힘이 오롯이 한데 모여야 합니다. 우리 모두의 연대와 참여가 이 기후위기를 이기는 힘입니다. 함께 이겨냅시다. 우리는 할 수 있습니다. 감사합니다.
We're grateful for this powerful message from Mayor Yom. Actually, it's a nice combination or complementary to the previous intervention from Mayor Reynolds, in the sense how they can combine climate emergency as a driving force to their more ambitious action, which is climate neutrality. And I think this is something that we'll hear frequently. Now we will come to Europe. I don't want to say come back, actually, because I'm based in Europe, but this was also diversity of our both actions and also commitments. So we will now hear from Mayor of Turku, Ms. Mine Arve. She has been, her city has been a long-time champion of climate action within ICLEI network. I remember she was announcing ICLEI's climate neutrality commitment in Montreal in 2018. And she also represented our voice in Madrid with Gonzalo Munoz, the champion from Chile, in the launching of the Climate Ambition Alliance. And she was one of the first cities to join that. And we will hear from her how they are going for climate positive, even a concept that is in combination of nature-based solutions, but also how Turku is also combining circular development to more ambitious climate action. So Mayor Arve, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for your leadership, and we're looking forward to your intervention.
Thank you, Yunus. Dear colleagues, Mr. Sarmet, Mr. Topping. Regards from Turku, from Finland. Good morning from here. We have a morning and a little bit rainy morning, but I'm so delighted to join this very important discussion today, and I hope that I'll have possibility to raise some issues what we are doing here in Turku, and maybe that will be interesting for you. So in 2018, we tightened our carbon neutrality targets significantly, and our city council approved unanimously to have a goal for carbon neutrality by the year 2029, which is only in few years' time, and that's the reason why the year is 2029 is that Turku will be celebrating its 800 years anniversary, so I consider it also as a gift from the city for the citizens, because that's why we are all doing this. So I'm delighted to say that we are also very much in the planned pathway in cutting emissions, as we have already cut our emissions by half this year since from the year 1990. And we intend to keep this reduction path and cut our emissions at least of 80% by 29. So what we are actually doing and what have we done? So we have been investing to renewable energy production. We have been investing to low carbon transport system. We have been investing to sustainable urban development, to circular economic transition, and strengthening our carbon sinks, just to mention a few concrete areas. And at the same time, our economy has been growing steadily, and these investments have created new jobs, which actually have been helping us to be resilient to the COVID-19 crisis that affected us too during this spring. And I see that this crisis as a chance to further redesign our economy in line with our climate targets. So we have a very ambitious plan, but our climate ambition is not stopping here to be carbon neutral by 2029. So we are planning to be climate positive area after 2029. So this means that we will be storing more carbon than emitting. And so how we are going to do this? This will be achieved by protecting existing carbon sinks in the city. In addition, we want to make sure that the emissions that cannot be avoided are compensated. Currently, we are working on creating a local compensation model that increases the amount of local carbon sinks. And we started to develop this local compensation model where we want to combine our own carbon sinks of the city of Turku, for example, the forests which are owned by the city, private landowners carbon sinks, so that the private persons could also take part to and maybe benefit economically as well. We are also including projects that are developing new technologies in storing carbon and projects that have other benefits, such as improving biodiversity, and including also research into carbon sequestration innovations. I strongly believe that innovations have a big share and a big purpose in the future, while we are actually developing this path for the future. So by combining these fields, we want to create carbon business models where regional companies, stakeholders and communities can take part either by selling or buying local compensation and or creating new innovations in storing carbon. And again, I would like to emphasize that cutting emissions is our priority, and only those emissions that cannot be avoided should be compensated. So this is one critical point and ambition we are consistently sharing with local stakeholders. But we could not do that, of course, only by cutting. We could not reach the carbon neutrality if we are not also at the same time having very much resource thinking and being resource wise. So this means that the city would be waste free, emission free, and we are using natural resources in sustainable way. And how we are going to do this is that we need to have a circular economic transition that would include everyone in the city. And how we make and use products, how we produce food generates almost half of the emissions in our current economic system. This is because the production of goods and infrastructures generates emissions all along the value chain. Circular economy is an effective tool to address these hidden emissions because it targets the design of products and aims at reducing resource extraction. And we are one of the first cities linking the circular economy to our climate plan and helping addressing greenhouse gas emissions in a systemic manner and beyond only its jurisdictional boundaries. We have 3 different pathways how we are reaching circular economy to help us, how the circular economy will help us to reach carbon neutrality. Firstly, we have supported private sector circular economy initiatives and innovations to generate new business models that would reduce demand for resource extraction. Industrial symbiosis is such new business model where companies can work together to identify synergies in production and create products from each other's unadapted resources. So industrial symbiosis helps to close resource loops across value chains. For example, as a part of the our city initiative, we have so-called smart chemistry park in Turku region where various companies reuse industrial waste streams of each other's, which companies can access from the surrounding industrial zone. And another example, Topinpuisto Circular Park is creating new innovative ways to refine textile waste into new raw material. Secondly, we have created new clean sources of energy from the waste. And what's concretely there, we have a new wastewater treatment plant, which covers energy from sludge and extracts thermal energy from the wastewater to produce heat for district heating for 15,000 households in our city. And thirdly, circular economy is an effective way of protecting natural carbon sinks. So by preventing waste and pollutants to enter ecosystems, the circular economy protects their ability to act as carbon sinks. For example, that wastewater treatment plant nutrition cycling activities have decreased nutrition pollution in the surrounding marine area very significantly, and actually we are discussing about more than 80% decrease in phosphorus load in the Turku marine area. We are circulated by the archipelago and the sea, and that's very important for us. And unfortunately, that sea has been quite polluted, and this is one of the main things what we have invested into that, saving our dear sea as well. So these pathways I just mentioned are linked to infrastructures and services that city is able to directly influence or support. But however, changes in consumption patterns and lifestyles are also crucial in order to reach our climate targets. That is why we need everyone to join these pathways and take this as an own initiative. And in Finland, the challenge is that the lifestyle carbon footprints will have to become about 10 times smaller by 2050 to meet the climate targets. And for this, we have to have everyone on board. And that's why we, in the future, will focus more on involving local businesses, stakeholders, our citizens, and communities in our climate actions and circular economy work. And we believe that everyone should be engaged. So my last point is that I would like to give you a heads up for an international campaign that the city of Turku will launch at ICLEI's Daring Cities 2020 virtual meeting in this autumn. It will be called the 1.5 Degree Life campaign, and it will encourage residents to consider the climate impact of their lifestyles and to share their best ways to live more sustainably. So our campaign vision is to produce innovative and empowering climate communication material through creativity and the global climate community. And I really thank you, ICLEI, and I will thank you in forward to all fellow cities for joining this campaign, and thank you for being able to be involved with this meeting today. Take care of yourselves during this COVID times, and we'll meet again in these terms. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Arve. In fact, that shows the plethora of options, solutions, be it technological, be it social change, which is giving us the tools for making our transition to low carbon or climate neutral, climate positive a reality. And actually in the next hour in the technical session, we'll also hear from your staff Lisa Lahti, who will go into further details, and we will also make more of use of this waste and consumption in the new climate action pathways of the Marrakesh Partnership. So that's very exciting. We know Governor Abe has to leave us, but as Minister Koizumi had announced, we have a new commitment from Japan, and actually Japan in that sense is a shining star, because we have a minister powerful, we have a leadership from a governor, and now we look to hear from Mr. Hayato Shimizu from Saitama City, who is one of the latest cities who committed to climate net zero. So, Mayor Shimizu, can we have your interventions, please?
Yep. Hello, everyone. I'm Hayato Shimizu, the mayor of Saitama City. I'd like to express my sincere gratitude for having this precious opportunity to speak here today. Saitama City, with a population of over 1.32 million, has grown to become the 9th largest city in Japan. As we all know, abnormal weather have caused us huge damages in recent years. In this month, the torrential rain in Kyushu have been classified as a catastrophic disaster in Japan, which poses a serious threat to human society and nature. In our city, the super typhoon Hagibis hit our city last October, caused tremendous damage. The risk of torrential rain and extreme heat is expected to increase with global warming in the future. And this event reminded us that we are facing a crisis. In order to pass on a sustainable society to the future, I believe all entities, including citizens, businesses, and governments, to share a sense of urgency and to proactively take initiatives. To make our determination clearer, Saitama City announced yesterday that we will strive to be the zero carbon city by 2050 to realize net zero carbon emissions. The Saitama City Global Warming Prevention Action Plan, which is under revision in this fiscal year, includes a backcasting plan that outlines the vision for 2050, the goals for 2030, and the measures to be taken to achieve them in order to realize a decarbonized society. I'd like to build a partnership among the Saitama City and the various stakeholders in the race to zero, to share the technologies and knowledge in order to achieve a zero carbon city together. In addition, we will continue to actively work towards Daring Cities 2020 and COP26 with the support of the Ministry of the Environment to ensure the measures to combat climate change are not stalled while taking measures against the COVID-19. Finally, I'd like to thank you once again for this opportunity to speak to you here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Shimizu. I think that shows how intense work is still needed, and to make sure that our commitments are practically implemented, and possibly showing the connection to the Japanese national targets, which Minister has announced that through the local engagement, they will be able to increase the Japanese ambition for climate action as well. So I'm now happy to come back to Bonn, but this time it's not me, but we have the honor of listening the intervention from the mayor of Bonn, Ashok Sridharan, whose city is hosting the ICLEI World Secretariat, but also UN Climate Change Secretariat. And in this regard, they have been championing for a long time. But Mayor Sridharan has also been leading ICLEI's work as the president of ICLEI, and we have been working with him in terms of, since Paris Agreement, how to take it forward. We will particularly hear how City of Bonn is taking climate action to ambitious level. So, Mayor Sridharan, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for your leadership, and we're eager to hear your experience in Bonn. Mayor Sridhan, the floor is yours. We cannot hear you well. Is there a connection challenge? We cannot hear you. Can we try again or no? No chance? Okay, that's a pity. Shall I suggest we have Nigel Topping on the line? Maybe we can hear from Nigel his impression, and meanwhile, maybe our technical colleagues could help us to sort out the connection issue so that we make better use of our time. If it is okay for you, Mayor Sridhan, I see you're nodding. So we will continue with Nigel. Nigel Topping, thank you very much for joining us since the beginning of the session, but not just for today, but through leadership from champions over the past years. We have made that the condition of local action is really a powerful tool to raise, and with your leadership now, we are taking it to a next level. So Nigel, you have been hearing from our mayors and governors all around the world. How does this feed into your plans for your plans to raise the race to zero more ambitious? Nigel, thanks a lot for your leadership once again, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yunus. Just first of all, make sure you can hear me.
We can hear you very well.
Great. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Okay, now maybe that works now. So let me start by thanking ICLEI. And I want to thank you, Yunus, personally. Also, Mayor Sridharan, I hope we get to hear from you later, but your personal and your institutional leadership from ICLEI is really inspiring. I also want to thank Minister, Mayors and Governors for all of your interventions. I'm really struck. I'm moved by the seriousness with which you take your responsibilities as public servants, actually. You know, several of you have spoken about both, you know, what is really the number one responsibility of public leaders to protect the well-being of their citizens, and the growing realization that we are facing increasing frequency and severity of natural disasters, and that many of you are dealing with that right now. And so my heart goes out to all those families who are dealing with the tragic circumstances, not only of the pandemic, but also of floods and other extreme weather events. And for those of you who are dealing with them, I'm also struck by the way that so many of you talk about the intergenerational responsibility of leadership, which I think is something that we're all more and more aware of as we realize just how serious the climate crisis is. You know, I'd like to pass on my thanks also on behalf of Gonzalo Munoz, my fellow climate champion. He's, I hope, fast asleep in Chile. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning. So, but I know he's with me, very enthusiastically following your work, and really excited to see your leadership going from strength to strength. You know, I have the honor of this role of the high-level climate action champion. Sometimes my job is to push people who are a bit reluctant, or to try and persuade people. Sometimes I like to say my job is just to applaud from the side, and I really feel like applauding all of your amazing work. I particularly like to recognize the leadership of Minister Koizumi and the Ministry of Environment for Japan, and you know, his inspiring remarks at the beginning about the pace of change and the way thinking is changing. And I think I got it right, 70 million people and 50% of the Japanese population now covered by cities and prefectures with net zero targets. And I think I also got right that now 100% of Korea and a third of Australian citizens similarly covered by such commitments. So I think this is really exciting, and of course we hope that this inspires national governments to be bolder, knowing that they have the support of their local governments and their citizens, and what we call the ambition loop. That as you raise your ambition, it makes it easier for national governments to raise their ambition in these crucial remaining months of 2020, when, as Ovias from the UN Climate Change said, governments have committed to ratcheting their ambition. And you know, the Race to Zero campaign that many of you have talked to was only launched about 2 months ago. Of course, it's based on the Climate Ambition Alliance, which itself was launched in September 25 at the Secretary General Summit. And the rate, we call it a race because every year and every 0.1 of a degree that we can get to zero earlier matters. It means less human suffering and less economic damage. Or put it in a positive way, it means more human thriving and more economic prosperity. And today we already have 1,000 businesses. I think now with all the new Japanese businesses, over 500 cities, 20 regions, investors with nearly $5 trillion worth of assets, and over 500 universities who are in the race. And we're working to increase those numbers by a factor of 10 by the time we get to Glasgow. Already over half of the world's economy is covered by our net zero targets because of the countries, the states and regions, the cities, the businesses who've made those commitments. And we think we can get that to over 70% by Glasgow next year. Already a quarter of the world's emissions are covered, and we hope to get that to at least half. Already a third of the world's population, and we hope with your help to keep growing that. We've worked very hard to make sure that the race to zero is rigorous. We've had some help from Oxford University and the community of initiatives such as ICLEI and the Under 2 Coalition and We Mean Business and Science-Based Targets. So all participants in the race to zero are required to commit to an initiative which encapsulates 4 Ps: a pledge to zero as soon as possible, but the latest 2050, a plan for the steps in the next 5-10 years. Of course, a pledge without a plan is hollow. Then getting on with the plan, as we've heard so many good examples from the previous speakers about specific actions, and then of course to reporting regularly on that. And you know, as champions, we're committed to working very closely with ICLEI and other partners like the Science Based Initiative for Cities to support local governments in joining that race at scale. I'd like to, so my job as champion is to applaud, but also to keep pushing for more ambition, because we haven't got enough ambition around the world. So I just want to end with some thoughts about what I'd like to ask you all to consider doing. First of all, please tell your story. Make sure everybody knows how serious your commitment is, why you've made it, and how it's driving a more resilient economy. The Mayor of Turku explained about some of the new jobs that are being generated by the commitment, how it's improving health and improving the air in your streets, and how it's making your city or state or province a better place to live. Secondly, recruit. We need more cities and more businesses. So if you've committed in your city, where are all the businesses in your city? You have relationships with lots of business, so encourage them to join as well. Thirdly, go faster. If you've committed to 2050, consider committing to 2045. There's 16 months until COP. There's lots of times to raise your ambition. I love the Turku ambition. I know it's because of your anniversary. I think it was your 800th anniversary. Congratulations on that. 2029. I always say no one ever sells a product for $10. They always sell it for $9.99. So personally, I think 2029, 2039, 2049 are much better targets than 2030, 2040, 2050, because they cognitively shift the goal by 10 years, even if it's only 1 year. So even if it's just 1 year, consider that. And finally, and I know many of you are doing this, but please support and help your national governments to raise their ambition. It's going to be absolutely key to the success of Paris is to have as many nations as possible. We already have 120 committed to join the Climate Ambition Alliance and raise their targets, but not all of them, including some of the countries that you come from. So it would be really great to have a net zero NDC from Korea, from Japan, from Australia, from Europe, and one that's as ambitious as possible. So please do whatever you can to encourage your national governments to do that, because this is a race that we will either win or lose together. And the more people are in the race, then the less risk and the higher the chance that we'll win. And that is something that we owe to future generations, not just the children that are on the streets today or will be after the pandemic, but the children as yet unborn to whom we owe a better future. So with that, and hoping that that's enough time for the technical problems to be resolved, Eunice, I'd just like to once again thank ICLEI for convening us all, for your commitment to advancing climate action globally. I think ICLEI and the leadership team there is a great example of the humility to engage with this multi-local government, which I've always talked about. And we're really proud to work with you and to keep building the radical collaboration that we need to win the race to zero together. Thank you, Eunice.
Nigel, thanks a lot. This is really very, very appreciated, encouraging words. And actually, just to once again underline, this webinar today was not the goal itself. It's just, in fact, a preparation for our work towards Glasgow. And in fact, in between, we will be in October having our Daring Cities, the global virtual forum of urban leaders taking on climate action and emergency. And in fact, this is hosted by City of Bonn. And I'm sure, I hope that we will be hearing from Mayor of Bonn. So this is also a nice handover to Mayor of Bonn. In the next hour, we will also go through your details of the technical work with our colleagues from the staff of our offices, so that we will continue to follow up. Definitely, this was the goal, that this is kicking off, in fact, not concluding, but kicking off, that we are accelerating every day, every month, so that we are confident that we will reach to our goals. So thank you very much, Nigel. Mayor Sridharan and my colleagues, are we able to hear from Mayor Sridharan at the moment? Just give me one more minute. Maybe we could have lost effort. Are we to control from the? Patricia, can you help me if there is any solution? And now we can hear you, Mayor Sridharan. Can we hear you? We cannot hear you.
He's self-muted, so he has to unmute himself. And yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Excellent.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay, so sorry for the problems, and good morning, a warm welcome, and a special thank you to all panelists for their encouraging messages. I commend Minister Koizumi for highlighting that an event uniting ministers, mayors, and UN agencies is exactly the type of dialogue we need to raise NDC ambition in the lead up to 26. Climate change requires commitment and action on all levels. More and more cities around the world go far beyond their respective nations' ambitions. This also applies to Bonn. We aim to be climate neutral by 2035. While we have performed well in the past, reducing our CO2 emissions by 25% between 1990 and 2016, this ambitious goal requires a complete paradigm shift, and with all stakeholders and citizens on board. We need to act together and are thus reaching out to our local communities, including initiatives such as Fridays for Future. Where we are at in Bonn on July 29th in 2020. Climate action in Bonn dates back to 1990. Our base year for our accomplishments in emission reduction, I have mentioned that we are currently down 25% from this mark. One focus area in our mitigation activities is increasing renewable energy use. With over 70% of renewable energy in the energy mix of our public energy provider, we are leading the way in Germany. We also provide support to homeowners via our Bonn Energy Agency and with tools such as our solar cadaster. We have launched mobility and clean air initiatives, and we are reaching out to citizens and communities through public campaigns. But despite all of this, we are facing a climate emergency, one our city council declared a year ago. So where do we want to go from here? Our first Bonn sustainability strategy was adopted in February 2019, a systemic agenda with 6 fields of action targeting integrated sustainable urban development for Bonn. Just a few months later, the Council announced its plan to achieve climate neutrality before 2035. As transport and buildings are our biggest emitters, we aim to drive change in both. And how do we get there? Our main focus is mitigation, but we will also think about offsetting. We need to listen to science, but we also need to deliver based on science, tracking our goals, actions, and achievements, and producing replicable blueprints. Multi-level governance and action are key. We are already piloting transformation, participating in a range of state and federal level programs. In the future, I hope that multi-level consultation and alliances become a new normal rather than a valued exception to the rule. Our main asset is people. The people of Bonn are highly supportive of climate action. The Citizens Board decided on a 2-year participatory process to unlock this potential. The City Council will debate the funding for that process soon. We, cities and regions, are in the same boat. We have wholeheartedly committed to ambitious targets, and we have the tools and the motivation to implement them. But we are aware of our limits and now need to find ways to move beyond them. One way is by taking responsibility. Where we are owners of the process, we can act by means of our territorial power and our ability to enforce state and federal law. Beyond legislation, there is of course an enormous potential for individual and economic action within our territories, which remains ours to unleash. I look at Nigel Topping, who in recent years has mobilized immense business potential with Me Business, and also at our panelists from Asia, Australia, and Europe. The world may have rocked by the corona pandemic, but I firmly believe that with the spirit shown today, the daring spirit, we can win the race to zero and thus the most important race of mankind. Together, we are heading towards a super year 2021 with 3 conventions and a COP, and we must make use of what is probably our last opportunity to turn the wheel. We will engage more cities and regions in ambitious climate action during the 3-week virtual Daring Cities conference hosted by ICLEI and Bonn this October. And we will strengthen multi-level cooperation. But no city, no region, no nation can do this alone. In the spirit of leave no one behind, we need to get everyone on board now. Thank you, take care, and stay healthy.
Thank you, Mayor Sridharan. I think that was an excellent also closing of our high-level session. In fact, this gives also a response partly to Nigel that this will not be stopping here, we will continue. And maybe, as Nigel, you have seen, Bonn and Turku was the first cities who joined the race, and actually they could also be considered as the ones who have fulfilled your first 4 criteria in terms of compliance. That by daring cities, we hope we could bring more cities who have demonstrated their compliance, but also more cities joining us. In the next 45 minutes, we will continue this webinar with our technical colleagues, Lisa Lahti, Toka Ucita, Kali Moksan, and Cesar Carreño. But before this, I'd like to ask us to have 5 minutes of a humanitarian break for our needs. Our high-level guests and speakers may continue their agendas for the rest of the day, so they may not be able to join us. Through this opportunity, I'd like to thank all of them for their guidance, for their leadership, empowerment, and encouraging us And we will continue these dialogues on the way to their inclusion and COP. Thank you very much. In 5 minutes, we'll be back, getting back to you, and stay safe. Thank you. Hello, Ashok.
Hi, Yunus. I'm very sorry. I don't know what went wrong.
No worries, Ashok. That always can happen. Just Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. Welcome to the second technical session of ICLEI's Race to Zero dialogue. An hour ago, we had enjoyed a fantastic panel of speakers from ministers, mayors, governors, our leaders, UN officials. I think this was inspirational for all of us that our leaders are leading us in the right direction. But of course, without the technical experts providing them the resources, the documentation, the tools, it's impossible to get to this political goal. So this part of the session, we will hear how political commitments can turn into action, and we will hear from a diversity of our colleagues across the world. I'm happy to inform you that today we are joined by Neutrality from city of Turku, Togo Uchita from ICLEI Japan, Sally Moksam, ICLEI Oceania, and Cesar Carreno. Our plan is to conclude this session by the next hour, which we have now 40 minutes or so. We would like to start with the same order I've announced. We heard from Mayor of Turku how Turku is advancing for their climate positive goals for 2029. And Lisa will take us through much more details about how encompassing, let's say, tools are available. And I'm informed that she would have a presentation that we will be taking us through. Lisa, the floor is yours. Once again, congratulations for the whole city of Turku, and we're eager to hear your experiences. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Good morning. I've been looking sometimes here because the other screen is there, so hopefully not too much. My pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Are we gonna have the presentation, or and if we are, we could go to the first slide right away.
Let me check my colleagues.
Yeah, if not, just let me know. So then because I rely on the visuals quite a lot, so then I need to kind of.
No, that was exactly because this is the time to have more concrete evidences. So I think we're appreciating your presentation. So my colleagues would probably inform me whether we are able to show the screen of the slides.
I have your slides, and 1 second, let me get them up.
So yeah, basically, I'm Lisa Lahti. I'm the project manager for the circular economy roadmap here in the Turku area, and I do hope that I give a bit more insight to the Race to Zero pledge plan, proceed and publish, and complement Mayor Arve's presentation. So I hope I do not repeat too much of what has already been said. Okay, nice, thank you. So right into it. So what does climate positive actually mean? So basically, it means that at least 80% of the emissions are reduced, and all the rest is compensated. And the things for the pledge section, the City Council actually approved a binding climate plan first time already year 2009, and since 2010, the city has used the Covenant of Mayors model to help to manage the climate-related issues in a holistic manner. So it's really something that we take it's a big issue, and we want to work systemic. We want to be ambitious and work long term. And as Minna said, the 2029 climate neutral target was made year 2018, and with unanimous vote by the City Council. And one thing to mention here is that actually when the goal was made, there were no alternative scenarios made. It was only that we have this ambitious goal and we have these milestones along the way, but no, okay, can we achieve it? No, it's an ambitious goal, and it's a strong signal that we want to get there. And as any plan, this one entails uncertainty as well, and it has to be acknowledged and accepted. So therefore, there is the 65 to 70% reduction target for 25. But as we have already managed to cut down almost 50% of the emissions this year, so we are really on the road to get there. Okay, next slide, please. So here we have the emissions, so how we have proceeded and where we aim to go. So as you see, we have managed to gain the speed needed for the emissions reduction, but we still need to gain more speed actually to get there to 2029. So at this moment, we can say that we have got the slack of the emission reductions, and now we need more ways to implement, more people involved. And as a bulk of the emissions, 2/3 come from the heating, and we have managed, you can see the darker blue section, that it has come down all the time. We have managed to cut those emissions. But for instance, the transport has been consistent through the years, and that's a bit more a tackle for us to do that. And also a thing to mention here is that we have estimated that the city can cut the emissions by half or max 2/3. So in order to actually reach these goals 2025 and 2029, we need everyone involved. Okay, then next slide, please. So here are the 5 areas we are focusing on to tackle the emissions. We also have the plans and actions for adaptation and mitigation, but I'm not going to focus on those here today. So I have picked a few points for each of these areas, and let's go through them now. Okay, so carbon neutral energy system. 2/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions in the Turku area are related to our energy system. And the energy company Turku Energy will not use any goal from 2022 onwards. Actually, the initial goal was 25, but again, there's the signal of when you have ambitious goals, you can even make them a bit forward, or you can implement them a bit ahead of time. So basically, this means that more share of the fuel will be bio-based, and we will use geothermal energy. However, we do need to cut a lot of the energy consumption. So the focus will turn more on the households and the housing companies, and we do need to really actualize the energy efficiency methods. Then, low carbon sustainable mobility. So about 1/5 of the greenhouse gas emissions in Turku area come from the transport. What we have been doing is that focusing, turning the public transportation into a carbon neutral service, and the aim is to have it at least by 29. For instance, with electric buses, so we are electrifying the transportation. Additionally, the city center will be made even more friendly for walkers and bikers. However, this is our biggest tackle. It's more diverse than energy production, for instance. And we do need more people, more solutions for this one. And we have estimated that about half of the remaining emissions will come from the transportation on 2029. So what we are doing, we want to focus on diversifying the means of transportation and make alternatives for private car use even more viable. So for instance, now we are working, for instance, could we have like more shared cars? Could we have more space for shared cars? How can we make the public transportation even more appealing? Are there enough bus stops, etc.? These are the means. Okay, how am I doing time, by the way? I didn't check what time I started. You can give me now.
Well, actually, maybe we can have maximum three more minutes so that we can.
That will, yes, that is totally doable.
Good.
Nice, thank you. Okay, so sustainable urban structure, and as we all know, it affects both energy and mobility in the entire urban area. So actually, we are focusing on functionality over the whole region. So not just Turku itself, but we are working with 13 surrounding towns to provide regional structural model for functional and sustainable urban planning. So to again work together, everybody has the same similar issues, and the emissions don't, and the solutions are not just combined by the like the borders of the city. There are some or actually several districts in the city where we are testing energy positive solutions and developing them together with different companies, for instance, and to get also residents involved. One of them example is the university town or university campus that will become energy positive campus area. But we are a growing area, so we have to balance with increasing number of inhabitants and the space for nature, for instance, and providing everybody these services. Okay, municipality-wide actions. To start with, it has to be mentioned that the Climate Plan 29 is actually binding throughout the city group, meaning the whole of city and its subsidiaries have to seek means to cut emissions. We do acknowledge that there is a lot work to be done in this field, and one of the challenges is to make this work truly systematic. Another challenge, and also the key, is to find diverse means to provide opportunities, tools, inspiration, and information. And we are really working on coming up with a shared story that inspires and is diverse, so everybody can find their role in building climate positive Turku. And I was happy to hear also Mr. Topping to highlight this and tell your story, get everybody involved and inspired. Another example of the systematic work in the Turku area is what I'm working with now, personally, the circular economy roadmap. It's created together with all different actors of Turku, and we aim to have a plan that will substantially speed up the transition to circular economy and resource-wise society. And how we're going to do it, we will come up with circular economy interventions. We are creating those together with a bunch of different numerous specialists around the area to really have them on board already from the get-go, and that we can implement and actualize those interventions within the next few years. Lastly, strengthening the carbon sinks. So basically this means that our nature has to be functional. So we have to take care of our natural inhabitants. So we are increasing the green areas, or we are aiming to increase the green areas of the city. And the challenge is to green all the city, also the built areas, not just to have some forest or some parks, but to have coverage around the whole city. And in order to sustain the green areas, as was mentioned, we are linking the green areas to compensation. So for instance, the forest owned by City of Turku already compensate for cities' passenger car emissions. And we are developing the model for compensation now for local actors to protect and increase their green areas. And we hope that this is a tool to raise awareness as well and motivate people to take part in our shared work. And finally, the progress, how to report it. So we report biannually to the city government and annually to the city council, and also annually via unified reporting system of ICLEI and CDP, where the results are also delivered to UN NASDA system. We have been reporting to CDP since 2013. Okay, that was quite a speed. Hope that provided more insight.
Thank you, Lisa. I think this was excellent for all of our, both the participants and also panelists, a real story from a city staff dealing day to day the challenges. And I particularly like, and since the time I've been listening to the journey of Turku, your realistic and pragmatic approach, saying that, look, it is a challenge, but you cannot achieve it as long as you don't work for it, and you cannot achieve it as long as you don't accept it. Especially this example of you put a target, then it's much easier to actually reach it, the more you make progress. And by even having some failures, you can say that, look, this doesn't work, so let's change it and let's introduce new things. Introducing these new concepts, circularity, carbon sinks, these are the type of things many cities do not necessarily consider as part of their climate activities or climate plans. So I think that was really helpful for all of us. So I hope you can stay with us so that we can hear from others. So now we will have three more. The two of them are really interesting. We will start with Togo. Togo is the director of ICLEI Japan, and in the previous hour, you heard. In fact, he's enjoying a huge luxury to live in a national situation or atmosphere where there's an ambitious national government. At least over the past couple of years, they have accelerated their vision to bring more actions. There is a lot of leadership, and there's a national, let's say, binding process, which is an ICLEI office there. So Togo will take us how he sees how the support of ICLEI into this whole machinery at the national level, and how do you see the next steps, because that will probably be very inspiring for the rest of the other countries as following Japan, a good practice definitely on the way forward. Please, Togo, we are hearing you.
Okay, thank you, Yunus, for this. So yes, I'm executive director for ICLEI Japan, and I'm in charge of looking at the sustainability works of the local governments in Japan. So from that perspective, let me share you how this has been developed here in Japan, so that maybe you have a bit of a better picture of why this is happening and how this is happening in Japan. So let me, partially it's a recap, but let me how do I say, introduce again of the statistics of where we are. So first, as of today, we have 148 local governments representing around 70 million population. That is approximately 55% of our national population. And the total GDP of these local governments are approximately $3.3 trillion US. Now, this is more than India, which is the 5th largest economy in the world. So you can understand the magnitude, the size of the local governments who has committed to zero carbon in Japan. And from my perspective, I see that there are mainly 3 reasons behind this rapid increase of commitment by local government to zero carbon in the last 12 months. First of all, as you heard from Minister, the leadership by Minister and himself and by the ministry is a very important factor that I think enable this situation that's happening in Japan. In terms of Minister, almost immediately after his assignment as a minister, he made a personal approaches to the local governments directly and encouraged further local governments to commit zero carbon by 2050. And he has used his personal connection to approach individual mayors and governors, and this has a huge effect for the local governments to sign up. In addition to that, Ministry of Environment Japan they have a regional offices across Japan, and they've been organizing COP seminar after every COP, and they use this occasion to inform public about the outcomes of COP and the stance of Japanese government. And there are a wide range of participants who participate in this seminar, from NGOs, from local governments, from universities, from just a general public who are interested. And I am also invited to this seminar, and I introduce about the action of non-state actors and how they've been committed to these discussion and the movement that we've been seeing internationally. And these kind of a soft influence of the minister and ministry has definitely, I think, has changed the atmosphere here in Japan in a positive way. Secondly, as you all know, the IPCC special report on 1.5 degrees was announced on October 2018. And based on this, local governments such as Kyoto, Tokyo, and Yokohama quickly responded to declare zero carbon by 2050 here in Japan. Now, this is really important because they are the leading local governments in Japan in terms of climate change. And it has been they've actually took a stance from the beginning to openly share their knowledge to other local governments. And they did this through, for example, seminars that we've been organizing as ICLEI Japan, and also Ministry of Environment of Japan, that they've organized this seminar for the local government. So for other local government, it's very, how do I say, convincing to hear from other local governments why they are committing to zero carbon. And we were lucky enough to have this leadership of Kyoto, Tokyo, and Yokohama who have led that and guided other local governments to follow them afterwards. And thirdly, and perhaps this is the most affecting factor, and as you may have heard from Nagano Governor Abe-san and also Saitama Mayor Shimizu-san, they've both mentioned about the disaster. So in Japan, we are seeing this growing weather-related natural disaster. And we are experiencing here in Japan, almost every year, we are hit by extreme weather. And it's rewriting records in many parts of Japan now. And as we speak, we have had a huge flood issue in southern part of Japan, the western part, and then also the northern part of Japan also was hit last night with a heavy rain. So climate change, we are feeling the climate change already, and local governments are standing up to this. So even under the pandemic of COVID-19, we are seeing new governments, new local governments signing up and declaring zero carbon. So this is the three main reasons I think we are seeing that the commitment increasing here in Japan. But let me just emphasize that this is not a short-term trend, and this is really important. So since and even before Kyoto Protocol, local governments here in Japan have been working on climate change, and I think it's fair to say that today's growing number of local governments declaring zero carbon is built on many years of commitment and experiences by the local governments, and therefore this is irreversible and firm trend. So as ICLEI Japan, we are very happy to be part of this process, and we are working together with ministry and NGOs and research organizations to actually move this forward and to make this plan a reality. So that's where we are. Thank you, Eunice.
Congratulations, Togo. I think this was really, as I said, it's a really good practice in how you have built your decades of work and now using this new momentum to leverage. We will now hear from Sally. Unfortunately, we know that she doesn't have that much luxury, because for so many years they have been trying to convince different levels of governments, which was certainly a challenge or a barrier for them. But the point that you made, that using the emergencies, using the disasters to convince and to be proving that they have to act on it, is some of the things that is very powerful, that is very active in Australia. Sally, so let's hear you. You have been actually joining recently to ICLEI. We're very happy to have you on board as an ICLEI staff, also supporting the GCOM in Australia, and you have been active in this space for a long time in the councils. So Sally, how do you see the different, let's say, mechanisms or driving forces or tools in Australia to tell to the rest of our partners around the world that it doesn't always have to be a perfect scenario? Even in the worst conditions or even in challenging conditions, you can make your climate neutrality dreams to come true. Sally, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm coming from Melbourne. We're in lockdown at the moment. That's why I'm in my study. Before I started with ICLEI, I was at the City of Darebin, and we heard from Mayor Anna Reynolds talking about the City of Darebin being the first city to declare a climate emergency. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about how that's evolved in Australia. So there was 2016 into 2017 and 2018, where a number of local governments declared a climate emergency. And from that, there's been an ongoing discussion about what does it mean to declare a climate emergency. And so we were starting to organise around a common definition. What we do know is that a climate emergency is we're achieving our goals faster, We're in a shorter time frame, we're doing more, we're increasing the ambition, but we're also calling upon state governments and national jurisdictional governments to take action. And there was a slow build with local governments declaring a climate emergency until about last year. Do people remember the bushfires in Australia? So bushfires are a normal part of the ecology in Australia, but last year was extraordinary. The area the size of the United Kingdom burnt between southern Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria. It's kind of most of that eastern seaboard on the map there. And so while we were having this dialogue, we'd had summits, we'd had discussions with local governments. Local governments were quite conservative to declare a climate emergency because the word emergency meant an emergency, and they didn't want to get it confused with the language around bushfires, a bushfire emergency, or like in Japan, a flooding emergency. But something happened to change that, and that was these particular kinds of bushfires that started in December and continued through into January. And these were fires like we'd never seen before. The Navy was called in to evacuate hundreds upon hundreds of people up the coast of New South Wales and Victoria, and aeroplanes to get people out of those areas. And then the phone started ringing. So all of a sudden, all these councils, these local governments were interested. We had phone calls from mayors in country Victoria. They're running out of water. Their towns are no longer able to provide enough water to sustain the population, and they either have to evacuate the town, or their coastal communities where they have to build a desalination plant for their water supply. And so we really saw this groundswell of action from local governments that perhaps weren't that active in the climate space. And so now we're at a point where there's no hesitation. We need to act. And as Anna Reynolds was saying, we're trying to put together with ICLEI a program that helps councils think about what a climate emergency looks like, you know, in drought, in flood, in the pandemic, when we have these multiple challenges all at once. You know, one of the interesting things about the pandemic is we had a big wave of volunteers to fight these fires. All these people joined the fire service, and now they're supposed to be training up for the next fire in the summer, and that's all cancelled. So we have these cascading challenges where actually we need to just jump ahead and say, it's not business as usual. We really need to move forward. And so I really think that's going to help support the Race to Zero and support the work of ICLEI and drive a much more cohesive dialogue across the, all these local governments. I'll just stop there for the minute. Thank you.
That was excellent, Stella. It's particularly important to emphasize the citizen engagement, and that was also Lisa's comments, and that's also very often we are hearing from our sustainability managers at the cities. They were saying that, look, it's not that we don't have the tools, it's not that we don't know the technologies, it's just how to make citizens embrace it and how to make them take ownership and then make it implemented. Because we all know there are limits of what you could do at the municipal operations. So community action is the key. So combining crisis and emergency, I think these are the things that really have to be carefully addressed and take it as an opportunity to our work. So I'm very happy to hear your experience as well. I know on the next round is our last speaker of the day is Cesar, ICLEI World Secretariat, Head of Climate Data. Cesar, are you on the line? I don't see your screen. Your microphone is also muted. It seems it's coming. Yeah, Cesar, just to let you know, I know that I said that would be 5 to 7 minutes. Maybe you can focus a bit more on the core of the technical work rather than the presentation of ICLEI in your presentation, so that we can make better use of the time. But I'm eager to hear your work as ICLEI, how we can now collectively make this bridge both from the locals but up to the global, so that through our tools, through reporting mechanisms, so that we can have this dialogue and synchronization continuing. Otherwise, because it will be very hard for individual cities to take on their own, and that's the whole mission of ICLEI, that we can make it much easier, the connection from locals to national and global processes. Cesar, the floor is yours. Cesar? I hope you're there.
Hi, Yunus, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Perfect, thank you very much. Can you all see my screen properly?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the presentation, Yunus, and thank you to all of the panelists for such an amazing presentation. Well, initially, and yes, thank you for the introduction as well, Yunus. I would like to start talking about how the climate neutrality concept is being developed by ICLEI, and of course, the work done by the Science Based Targets cities group supports the race to net zero, and how do they connect at the international level and align principles for cities to share their experiences, and why not to enhance and leapfrog their targets. Okay, a short introduction on ICLEI's 5 pathways towards sustainable development, because we built our climate neutrality concept on top of our 5 pathways. We have low emission development, nature-based development, equitable and people-centered development, resilient development, and of course, we cannot forget the circular development, which is very important for cities. No? So the 5 pathways have been designed to create a systemic change, including all of the relevant stakeholders, policymakers, citizens, the private sector, academia, researchers, and these, of course, bring integrated solutions that takes into account all of these 5 pathways or pillars, and increase their synergies, identify for their synergies, and look for ways to work with each other. No? So we move beyond a single city. The ideal is to connect all of the efforts that have been developed by cities in the different pillars, and how do they link both regionally and locally, and why not having a global impact at the end of the day. Of course, taking into account that it's not only cities, but also regions, territories, states, provinces, all of the different types of subnational governments, which includes willing political leaders. It is important to highlight that we, of course, are looking for interconnected actions, and how can they support each other, sharing knowledge, experience, and why not procedures and methodologies. What is the vision for the climate neutrality from ICLEI towards Daring Cities 2020, which the virtual event that will take place this year? There are 4 main points. The first is to drastically reduce the greenhouse gases, taking into account the vision of science-based targets, striving to net zero, and reduce consumption. And of course, it needs to be accounted for all of the sources and removals in governmental operations and citywide. Number 2, identify what the investments have been made, and of course, looking forward to divest into mobile divestment from fossil fuel towards funding climate and energy action, being this energy efficiency, renewable energy, carbon sinks, and having a measurable impact, a way to measure the impact not only for reductions and financial indicators, but also for co-benefits, for instance, for vulnerable population, adaptations, etc. Number 3, offset and compensate any reminder greenhouse gas emissions, because they cannot be reduced immediately or to 100%. And it will need to include setting mechanisms, so for instance, the UN recognized mechanisms and voluntary market. And of course, why not donations to climate funds from the private sectors, and collaboration with the political leaders and with the city or local government administration, aiming to upscale and progressively reduce 100% of the community emissions. Number 4, adapt to a changing climate and its impacts, and of course, enhance climate resilience across all sectors and procedures. So what is the main objective of these 4 points? To include and to provide a platform for the cities and regional governments into which they will be able to set their targets for mitigation, but without losing sight on other specific topics like adaptation, resilience, and finance. In regards to complementarity, of course, it is important to highlight the response to climate emergency, because a climate emergency can be used as a tool to mobilize technical resources, financial resources, human resources, in closer cooperation with the national government. This will enhance and leverage the vertical integration and multi-level governance, and of course, of ambitious mobilization through political commitment, and the Daring Cities approach. For taking into account here, they need to know what is needed from their cities or from the governments, and of course, always observing towards the science-based targets commitments. They need to act to integrate a holistic planning and lead multi-level, multi-stakeholders and collaborative action. So we are trying to provide synergies and integration, both horizontal and vertically. Horizontal, taking into account all of the pillars and the pathways, and vertically, taking into account multi-level governance, which could include cities, states, and the national government. Climate neutrality by 2050, we have the 4 pillars. Reduce greenhouse gases emissions, the second pillar, which includes divest and invest, split in 2, of course, for easier visualization, and the third pillar, which is offsetting and compensation, like mentioned before. So this provides a visualization what is expected from political leaders, different stakeholders, and why not the community in general. Important to highlight, like I mentioned, pillar 4, adapt and enhance resilience in all sectors. So our concept is not aiming towards purely mitigation, but we see an expanded criteria that will enhance and increase the synergy. Now, this is our program and, of course, our method with the Green Climate Cities, which will allow cities, political leaders, technical staff to have an overview of their process towards climate neutrality. Here we see the donut, which includes 3 different phases: analyze, act, and accelerate. Each one also includes 3 different sub-steps. As we can see here, for act, we have developing integrated climate action plan, detailed finance and projects, implement and monitors. As you can see, this takes into account all of the recommendations that we will provide for our climate neutrality concept. So cities can be free to use the Green Climate Cities tool and methodology and program to reach their climate neutrality target, taking into account a comprehensive process methodology, step-by-step guidance, monitoring system to track progress, and embedding climate change lens in all activities, governmental and operations, city and community-wide, including budget and planning across all sectors. This, of course, is complemented through ICLEI's Pioneers of Climate Ambition. As you can see here, the program was announced in COP25 in Madrid in 2019 and includes not only specific commitments for mitigation, could be this reduction of greenhouse gases, but also commitment to 100% renewables, climate emergency declaration, fossil fuel divestment, etc. No? So there has been a great leap of numbers. We can see here that we have 200 plus Korean cities declaring climate emergency, 60 plus Korean cities committed to net zero 1 month later, and 63 Japanese cities and prefectures. So here you can see a mix of all of the different targets and commitments that cities are taking, and all of them have a different scope, but all of them aim towards the same goal. So this is the ICLEI's Pioneers of Climate Ambition, which expect to mobilize and to increase the number further on down the road. Now, how does the science-based target connect with the race to zero? Like I mentioned before, both the ICLEI climate neutrality concept and the science-based target provide support for cities, and they can be used as a gateway to commit for the race to zero. The science-based target for cities is supported by a science-based target initiative, and the cities group is composed by ICLEI, WRI, C40, CDP, WWF, and the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. The main task, which has been developed from the past year, was to review all of the available methodologies for cities that provides technical guidance for setting a science-based target. This includes methodologies from Dow scaling, taking into account the most updated carbon budget published by IPCC, and how they can use different indicators to allocate the budget per country and per city. This includes data in 2020 from C40, scattering, and the OPCC methodology. Our task was to identify the cross-cutting criteria, where were the main principles that replicated between all of these methodologies, and later on define the most suitable methodology according to city typology, because not all of these methods can be used in all of the cities. So there's not one size fits all. So we have different methodologies that can be applied for different types of cities according to population, geographical location, GDP, etc. And of course, comparing to the starting line criteria for the race to net zero, we have here pledge, plan, proceed, and publish. All of these points have been taken into account, and all of them are integrated in the final product that we will publish this year. The methodology has been shared, and we are now compiling a report which will be made public within the next few months. So how all of this supports the race to net zero? Well, it's a parallel and aligned work where criteria and requirements share a common approach between all the three streams. We have the race to net zero, and then we have the science-based targets supported by ICLEI, C40, WRI, WWF, CDP, and the Global Covenant of Affairs for Climate and Energy. They do feed from each other. They take ideas from each other in order to maintain a common approach, common criteria, without any constraint or clash between the principles. The ICLEI climate neutrality framework outlines the integrated approach, which includes mitigation, adaptation, resilience, and finance. ICLEI contributes both as a network directly with Race to Net Zero and indirectly as part of the science-based target cities group. This means that we have this key role in supporting cities and all of the initiatives and methodologies that we will support them to reach their target of zero emissions. The science-based targets takes a more technical perspective based on existing methodology, while ICLEI provides a framework which englobes and reach other aspects, but not only mitigation. So we take into account this integrated approach. There will be a toolbox coming that will assist all types of cities in choosing a suitable methodology. This is the work that we are developing so far. And of course, all of the local governments will benefit from this shared consensus approach that will reduce the burden and will ease the process to commit, to declare climate emergency, to set a target, so forth and so on. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Cesar. Thank you, Cesar. I think that shows the depth of the work that we have to undertake. But the more we have this information from our members, from our experts, from regional offices, that we can feed back to the UN and vice versa. The new information coming from UN can be channeled to our members. And a number of times you heard the Daring Cities event that's coming up in October. As we said, that today is not the end of the journey, but in fact that we are kicking off our plans so that we accelerate. In that regard, I'd like to invite my colleague Ariel to make a snapshot of what to expect in Daring Cities in October, so that we can leave this webinar with new homeworks or new targets, so that we can better be prepared. Ariel, please, as our communications head, please share with us what to expect in Daring Cities.
Thanks so much, Eunice. I'm so excited to be here with everyone today, and so excited for all of you who have stuck with us for this entire 2 hours. So just one last minute here to ask you to continue this journey with us. So this October, we will continue into Daring Cities, which is our global virtual forum for urban leaders tackling the climate emergency. And so, what you've experienced today is just a tiny preview of what we're hoping Daring Cities will be bringing together, really, as much as possible, the very nitty-gritty how, as well as the motivating political will that I feel like you've heard really both of those sides today. So our second half presenters here have been so great at making it clear, how they're actually getting the work done, preceded by those political leaders who are telling us about how they've been able to motivate the political will within their own jurisdictions to make these commitments. So Daring Cities will be 3 weeks of events just like this and beyond, getting into really how to address the climate crisis interlinked with the COVID-19 recovery. We invite all urban leaders, staff, partners to join us. We're going to have many different types of content throughout these weeks, networking opportunities, asynchronous learning, so there'll be different kinds of ways to engage, so it won't just be live sessions. And it all starts at daringcities.org, so that if you haven't been there yet, I invite you to visit that site as the program becomes more fleshed out, that's where the invitations will be. That's where you can be notified to join specific events as they become available. So I hope to see you all in October, and thanks so much for joining us again today.
Excellent, Ariel. Just to compliment those who have been participating in ICLEI's Resident Cities Congress over the past 10 years. You may have noticed that, in fact, Daring Cities is taking our annual gathering to a next level, but taking the benefit of this new virtual digitalization, but in particularly to complement or to support the next 10 years. As you have seen, there will be new NDCs coming up. We are talking about the decade of action, so that Daring Cities will be a continuous platform that we can monitor and take it forward, so that we don't leave anyone behind, and we collectively raise our ambition and make sure action is done, it is shared by all, and we can learn from each other and make a confidence that our citizens are able to trust their local and global leaders in serving their needs. So with this, I would like to conclude. It was really a journey of 2 hours, as Ariel mentioned. Thanks a lot for all colleagues who joined us starting from the beginning as a participant, but a special thanks to all our panelists. I know during this session we have received a couple of comments and remarks, especially some of our participants who have unfortunately left some of them, but what we'll be making sure that we will convey these feedbacks to our panelists, and we will continue to take into account their comments. For future activities, please stay in line in terms of our updates from Daring Cities. From the LGMA as the constituency, we can also keep you updated on the UNFCCC process. With this, I'd like to conclude this session and wishing you all a nice day ahead and safe days ahead. And we will look forward to bringing more results and more ambitious announcements for Daring Cities. And we will be communicating these processes to the global process as well. With this, once again, wish you all a nice day, a nice week, and thanks a lot for all your patience. Some of the technical issues, but I think it was also a good experience for all of us for such a long journey. So with that in mind, thanks a lot and take care.